Today we're going to be talking about the 2020 driver lineups. Now, it's something we all like to do every single year. It's very interesting to predict which drivers are going to be making certain moves for the upcoming season. So, of course, a lot of people are already confirmed in their seat, which does limit this somewhat, but nonetheless, there is some room for some creativity. So, in today's video, I'm going to be going through all of the teams and all of the drivers who I think will be racing in the 2020 season. And I'm interested to know your thoughts and opinions on this one, because there will be lots of difference of opinions in a lot of what I'm going to be saying in today's video. So, we'll start off with Mercedes, of course, the current championship leaders, the people who have won the championship, both drivers and constructors, for the last, 4 or 5 years now. It's going to be another Mercedes victory we expect this season, so it is the team to be with probably going into the 2020 season. I fully expect Lewis Hamilton to stay with the team. He signed a contract. I assume he's going to honour that and stay with them next season, especially with the possibility of equaling Michael Schumacher's 7-time world champion record next year if he wins this championship, and next one to go along with it. Then who to go alongside him? Well, it's interesting because there are a couple of candidates, of course. Esteban Ocon, you've got their current driver Valtteri Bottas, and a couple of outside sources. People like Ricciardo might be looking for a seat. Verstappen, who knows? Maybe even someone like Sebastian Vettel wants to put himself up against Lewis Hamilton 1-for-1. Nonetheless, I think I'm going to be going with the most predictable one, is that I think Mercedes will probably keep Valtteri Bottas for another season. He's been doing a lot better this year, whilst he has still had some down moments. His general pace has been a bit closer to Lewis Hamilton. Of course, he had 2 fantastic victories already this season. Australia, in a bit of a class of his own. Baku, it was a little bit closer, but still, he showed he had some very good pace in that race as well. So, I would expect Mercedes to keep the team consistent for another year. But definitely going into the 2021 season, possibly when the regulations change up a little bit, I'd fully expect them to assess their lineup, especially if Lewis Hamilton hasn't won the 2020 championship, because I think he might retire if he doesn't win 19 and 20. Of course, there is the possibility that Lewis Hamilton could retire at the end of this year, whether he wins the championship or not. I personally don't think he'll ever do a Nico Rosberg. I can't honestly see him retiring after winning a championship. Of course, could be completely wrong there, but I feel like Lewis Hamilton is the sort of person to retire once he realises he's maximised his peak. But if he's still winning championships, I don't think he'd see the point in retiring at that point there, especially as he is so close to Michael Schumacher's record, or at least equalling it. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one, obviously, because 2020 Mercedes definitely will be the team to be at most likely. So, interesting times here, but I think Hamilton and Bottas will be the 2-car team within Mercedes next year. Let's move on to Ferrari. Of course, many people see them as the team to be within Formula 1, through their history at least. And I think they've got a great driver there in Charles Leclerc. Many of us see him as a future world champion, whether that's in the immediate future or maybe 4 or 5 years down the line. Who knows? But in my opinion, him, Max Verstappen are going to be 2 of the drivers competing for championships over the next 4 or 5 years, and it's going to be very exciting to see them go wheel to wheel yet again. Hopefully more than just a race victory at hand going into the future. So if we go back to Ferrari, I think they'll definitely stick with Charles Leclerc for a number of years in the future. He is a great talent to have within their team, and I think it's very good that they promoted him so early. Now, Sebastian Vettel, does he stay or does he go? A very interesting question. Lots of rumours suggesting he will want to retire at the end of this year. I kind of get the idea that he isn't quite in love with the sport that he signed up to way back in 2007 when he broke into the scene in BMW and then Toro Rosso. I don't feel that he's got the same passion for the sport as he did back then. But nonetheless, I don't see him retiring at this point. He said he wanted to win a championship with Ferrari. Now, this last couple of years has definitely been his best opportunity to do so. Most notably, 2018, you felt like it all went away from him and he was very close. But there's still probably opportunities in the future. Ferrari aren't a million miles away from being a quick car, and we even saw it at the most recent Grand Prix in Austria. They can be quick, maybe just not on a consistent basis. So for that, I'm going to say Sebastian Vettel will at least give Ferrari one more year. So I'll say Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc to be the two drivers at Ferrari in the 2020 season. So now a very exciting one, Red Bull. Now, lots is going on here. Of course, Pierre Gasly isn't having the best of seasons. I think that a lot of people want to see him go, but I'm on the side of just giving him time. I know what happened as a Danny Kvyat fan. They sort of rushed into a decision, which ended up being a great decision to get Verstappen in the team. But nonetheless, they rushed into a decision and kind of destroyed Kvyat for at least 2 years there. I don't want that to happen to Pierre Gasly, but at the same time, Red Bull are ruthless. And I think I will speak about this in a video in the next couple of weeks. Nonetheless, I think that Red Bull will change for 2020. And I think there will be a big change. Very exciting times ahead, I think, for Red Bull. And this is, going a bit left field. Maybe not going the normal route of going within the Red Bull driver program. As much as I would love to see Danny Kvyat be promoted back to Red Bull after all he's gone through. I think they'll of course keep Verstappen. No need to get rid of him. If anything, he's going to be wanting to look elsewhere to try and win a championship. But I think Red Bull will have both hands around him to make sure he stays for at least another year. Then, who do we look outside of? I'm saying Gasly's not going to stay. Who do I think will come here? Well, it's been rumoured a little bit recently, and that's Nico Hulkenberg. I think Helmut Marko had some choice words about Hulkenberg in the recent time, but he's actually gone back on those somewhat and actually said that Hulkenberg is a decent driver. And of course, when you compare him against Daniel Ricciardo, they've been very, very equal this year. Of course, some races, Hulk's ahead, sometimes Ricciardo's ahead. It's very close between the two of them. And I think that you realise that, and you realise how good Hulkenberg can be, and he just hasn't had the opportunity to go for podiums and go for victories in his career so far because of his team decisions. I think it'd be a very wise call for Helmut Marko to give him the opportunity, because who knows, he could really relish in a top team once he's given the opportunity. Of course, he tried the Renault route. I don't know whether Renault are going to be quite on par with Red Bull over the next couple of years. They're definitely making strides forward, but if Hulkenberg wants a championship before he's 35 or 36 years old, I'd honestly say Renault is not the best option to be with right now. He probably should try and risk it and go to Red Bull, because who knows what could happen, especially going into the 2021 rules regulations. If Red Bull get that right, we could be in for a period of dominance with them behind the wheel. Nonetheless, I'm going to go with this slightly left field choice of Hulkenberg to partner Max Verstappen at Red Bull Racing in 2020. Now, the next one I don't really need to speak about too much because it's all confirmed over at McLaren. Done a fantastic job this season. They've really progressed forward, exceeded a lot of people's expectations. I think most F1 fans didn't see them going to be best of the rest this year, and most, or more often than not I should say, they are ending up being that team, which is great. Really fantastic stuff, especially with two young drivers within the team. So fantastic job by Norris and Sainz, and rightfully so, signed up for more seasons to come. I think it's really nice to see them put the trust in Lando Norris. He's had a really, really good start to this season, matching Carlos Sainz on a lot of occasions and sometimes beating him, which is very, very impressive as a rookie. And you could compare him to the likes of Lewis Hamilton coming to the sport and rivaling such an experienced driver so early on. So great stuff from Lando Norris, and I think the whole McLaren team is looking on a great forward projectile and hopefully towards the podiums over the next couple of years, and maybe even race victories in championships. We can keep our fingers crossed, but nonetheless, the signings of Norris and Sainz has been a fantastic step to make sure that does happen for the team. So looking at Renault now, we spoke about recently where I think Hulkenberg will go if he does leave Renault. The best option there would be Red Bull. But nonetheless, what would happen to Renault? Because there would be need for a driver then. So I think Ricciardo has committed his short-term future to them. Maybe we can see the rule changes. Maybe in 2021 he's hoping Renault come out with a fantastic car. And if that's the case, Ricciardo could be on course for a championship or two in that era. But he's not going to be able to win a championship before then. I think Renault are definitely a team to look at, but I don't see them quite being able to match Red Bull. So it's maybe a wise call if Hulkenberg does decide to jump ship. Nonetheless, we're speaking about Renault, and I think Ricciardo's obviously going to stay. But who will partner him? So lots of rumours over the last couple of months, and even years really. You look at Esteban Ocon. he hasn't always been a Mercedes young driver. Before he was a Mercedes young driver, he was part of the sort of Lotus GP young drivers program, which ended up being the Renault young drivers program. And he's been with this team before. He's test drove for them and he's done some really good stuff with the team. They really like working with Esteban. So this could be a really, really clever call here by Renault. Of course, we all know how good Esteban Ocon is. Maybe everyone doesn't think he's worthy of a Mercedes seat right now, which is understandable. Maybe Mercedes could just loan him to Renault. But I think the smart thing for Esteban Ocon to do at the end of this year would be to cut ties with Mercedes. He's had some great opportunities thanks to them, but I can't see him being in a Mercedes drive in the next couple of years. In my opinion, they would go with Russell or someone else if they were going to be replacing Bottas at the end of this season. So, I think Ocon should cut ties with Mercedes. It's a bold call and go to Renault. I think that would be a really clever move from him. And I think Renault have always wanted to have Esteban Ocon back. There have been rumours in the past that this could happen. So I think there's a strong likelihood we could see Esteban back in Formula 1 next year. And if he doesn't come back next year, you'd say maybe that's a bit too late. He's left it too many years. And maybe that could be him out of Formula 1 forever. So I think Esteban, he needs to make a move. He needs to get back into Formula 1. And Renault probably is the strongest possibility right now. So now let's speak about Sauber Alfa Romeo. So they've had a very up and down season so far. Kimi Raikkonen scoring a lot of points for the team, whereas Giovinazzi has definitely been struggling. Nonetheless, it's definitely a team that you could definitely jump into and score a decent amount of points if you wanted to jump ship. So I'd say Kimi Raikkonen is going to stay for another season. I fully think that 2020 could be his last year in Formula 1. Now, of course, not 100% sure here. He could go on and decide to jump ship once again for the 2021 rules regulations. But I think it's fantastic to see Kimi Raikkonen definitely enjoying Formula 1 a bit more right now. Maybe not enjoying finishing like 14th and 15th in some races, but nonetheless, he's racing because he loves it. And honestly, I didn't know that really about Raikkonen. I thought he was just sort of kind of staying with Ferrari because he loved the money. I'm not going to lie, that kind of was in the back of my head that he was staying with them because he just wanted the paycheck. But it's blatantly obvious that wasn't the case, and he's just a massive fan of the sport. And he's done a fantastic job at Sauber Alfa Romeo. The car isn't always underneath him, but he does a great job to bring home the points. So I think he'll stay for 2020. And alongside him, I've put someone a little bit different, which we'll have to speak about in a minute. I put Sergio Perez. I think Sergio Perez is probably done with Racing Point at the end of this season. I think that, personally, I feel like they're trying to maybe get him out of the team. He isn't really outshining Lance Stroll that much. Of course, he's beating him. We all fully expected that. But he's not absolutely destroying him, whereas most people thought that was going to be the case. So it could be an interesting call here. But I'm saying Sergio Perez, if he wants to jump ship and stay in the midfield, probably one of the best places he could honestly go with his money behind him would be Sauber Alfa Romeo. That could be a decent match, and especially with Sergio Perez already racing for that sort of team in the past. He raced for Sauber, of course, for his debut couple of seasons. So I think that'd be a really interesting move back to Sauber, and it could work out for him well. If anything, Sauber have been, or I should say Alfa Romeo have been, a better team than Racing Point in most races this season. So that could be an exciting move for him. I definitely get the feel that Sauber Alfa Romeo is on the up, whereas Force India has sort of hit a plateau in sport right now. So next up, we'll speak about Racing Point. So, of course, with Lance Stroll's father owning the team somewhat, it's going to be tough for him to be kicked out of the sport. So, Racing Point, basically Stroll is a guarantee right now. Maybe money's coming in the future to make sure this team sort of jumps up the grid a bit, but if we look at it as of right now, they're definitely towards the back of the grid. And so, who would I put alongside him? Well, I think Mercedes have got to push their young driver right now, George Russell. They've got to push him into a better seat. It's fantastic what Williams have been able to do for George. I think it's great that he's got a Formula 1 seat this year. If anything, Williams should have really chased the money this year. They need it by the sounds of it. So I think it was fantastic that they took the risk and put such a great British driver in the team, even though, of course, he can't really do anything better than 19th right now, but he's consistently beating Robert Kubica, one of the great drivers in our sport over the last couple of years. Take out the injury, he's a fantastic driver, and the fact that George is being in there and close and competitive and always beating him is really good to see for George's point of view. But I definitely think Mercedes will want to push him up the grid a bit, see what he's like in the mid-pack, what's he against, like-minded drivers, is he going to be able to battle them, is he going to be able to overtake them? That's the sort of stuff they really need to see. So I think they're going to push for a Force India Racing Point seat in the coming years, and I think 2020 is a good option there. So I think Mercedes will put a bit of money behind that, or maybe give Racing Point some free engines. But I think that's definitely the call they should make. They should put Russell alongside Stroll for 2020. Yes, it's a very young lineup, a lineup that would be, 21 years old each, something like that. It would be interesting for the sport, but I think for Racing Point, for Mercedes, especially for George Russell, that would be a great move, and I think that they should definitely try and work that out. So next up, I'm going to speak about Haas. So, of course, they've had a bit of a tough couple of weeks, really. They've had issues with their sponsors. They've had tough results where nothing seems to go their way. And in general, they really haven't had the season they would have expected. They are, over the last sort of 4 or 5 races, languishing towards the back near Williams. So, I fully expect them to maybe go over a bit of a rehaul at the end of this season. I see no reason for them to get rid of Magnussen. He's been their more consistent driver over the last sort of 2 or 3 years. In my opinion, they need to keep him. If anything, Magnussen could be poached by someone else. And I honestly think he's good enough to be poached by someone else, even though some of his bad boy antics might catch up to him from time to time. Nonetheless, Magnussen will probably stay at Haas, and who will be alongside him? Once again, I've gone with a slightly left field choice in this one. I've gone with Nick de Vries. He's the current Formula 2 championship leader, and it doesn't really matter whether you finish first or second in Formula 2, you end up with a super license, so that doesn't really matter. He's going to be in Formula 1 basically whatever, especially with his results in past Formula 2 seasons. He's pretty much guaranteed that wherever he finishes in the sort of top 5 of this championship season. So I think that they'll probably take him. I get the feeling that he's got a bit of sponsorship behind him, so that would be good for Haas as well, especially with, you expect Rich Energy to be going away from the team at the end of this season. So nonetheless, I think that this would be a good match. A really experienced driver in Magnussen and an up-and-coming driver in Nick de Vries. I honestly feel he's a very, very talented driver, and he got slightly tough season last year in F2 where the Prema team didn't seem to be quite at it, and even then he was still up the top battling for race wins and not quite battling for the championship. But nonetheless, I think that he'll probably migrate into Formula 1 next year. If he doesn't do it next year, he probably won't be in Formula 1 at all. That's because he's 23, 24 years old, already quite old to be winning Formula 2, I should say, as is Nicholas Latifi, who we'll speak about in a minute. But nonetheless, I think that he'll probably end up at Haas next season, which would be an interesting lineup within their team. Next up, I'm going to go with Toro Rosso. I'm going to keep this one pretty simple. I'm going to say they're going to keep their lineup from this year, Albon and Kvyat. Even though I'm a massive Kvyat fan, I think it'd be great for him to just stay in that team for another year, get some more experience, and just show the world that he's definitely better than Albon, because a couple of races so far this year, he has let Albon, get ahead of him and has struggled in some areas. And I think that to be called up to Red Bull, he needs to be comfortably beating someone like Albon, who's brand new to Formula 1. So I think it would be good for Toro Rosso, good for Formula 1, good for both the drivers to just stick it out at Toro Rosso for another year at least. And, you look at their up-and-coming drivers in the Red Bull Young Drivers program. They've got Yuri Vips, probably not going to be scoring enough super license points this year, even though he's doing a good job in Formula 3. Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda, I think, is also a Red Bull Young driver. You've got Pato Award, who's definitely not going to have enough super license points for next year. And Dan Ticktum, I don't know what's going on there really, but a lot of promise from Dan Ticktum, and it just didn't really work out for him, and I think he's pretty much dropped from their program looking to the future. So nonetheless, I think that Toro Rosso basically need to keep these two drivers next year. They can't let the same situation as last year, with having to rehire two dropped candidates from the past. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on that one, but I personally feel that Toro Rosso need to keep those two drivers at least, or maybe bring back Gasly, who I haven't actually put at all in this list, and that's maybe because I think Red Bull might have fallen out a bit of love with Pierre Gasly, because he's definitely been struggling so far this year. So let's speak about Williams. Last but not least, hopefully in the 2020 season, I think they're going to have to sort of completely rehaul their team for next year, especially with Russell. I expect him to leave. I mean, I think that it would make most sense for him to leave and try and go to Racing Point next year, a car that would be most likely more competitive. So what do Williams do? It's a tough one. I have nothing against Kubica. I feel like I have to preface that, because I feel like a lot of people will read into this, but what he's doing for Formula 1 and for Poland in Formula 1 is fantastic. I think it's great to see Kubica name back in Formula 1, but is he enjoying life at the back of the grid? Probably not. I think honestly he would enjoy motorsport more if he was in a competitive car in a competitive championship, because as much as I love Williams, I can't see them being a decent point scorer next year. I can see them still being at the back of the grid until these new rule changes come in at least. So, I mean, if they want to keep Kubica, fair play. I feel like he might not really accomplish too much right now, because that car just doesn't seem like it's going to ever be competitive enough, but it will inevitably get there. It will score points either at the end of this year or in 2020, but I think they need to completely rehaul. And the lineup I put here is Latifi from Formula 2. I think he'll score enough super license points, and I think that'll be a good thing for him. He's put a lot of his money and investment in Williams already, and okay, he probably would rather go into a team that's scoring points, but nonetheless, I think he'll be just happy to come into Formula 1. And I think Williams is the most likely team for that to happen. So he just needs to make sure he has a strong end to this season. I think basically get top 3 in the F2 Championship this year will basically confirm him to be in a super license points zone, meaning he can graduate to Formula 1. And of course, I'd say that he will be in the Williams team, considering he's done all the testing for them. And I've put alongside him Romain Grosjean. So that's a very random one, I know. But I've gone with a few left field choices in this video so far, so I'll keep that up in this one. So the reason why I put Grosjean here, I think that Latifi will want sort of a mentor within the team, someone who's had a decent amount of experience in the sport. I feel like Haas will want to get rid of Grosjean because of his just issues with the team over the last couple of years. It's nothing like personal with them, I don't think, but it's just the results aren't coming, and it's a results-driven business, so you can't really be having a driver constantly making these sort of mistakes and having these sort of issues. So they'll probably want to separate from this partnership. Maybe even Grosjean sees it from his side as well. He'll want to move on to different things. And Williams could be a decent chance to rebuild his career somewhat, because I guess maybe his reputation's been dented somewhat over the last 18 months, where you felt like he's got to be a very strong driver at the start of the 2018 season, then a load of errors, and then it got a bit better, and then a few more comical errors at the start of this year have all sort of put a bit of a tint on Grosjean, and everyone maybe not seeing him as quite the driver that he honestly is. I think he's a very talented driver, and I don't think he's getting quite the credit he deserves, but then he's making his mistakes, so it's hard for people to give the credit. So Latifi and Grosjean is my Williams choice, so let me know your thoughts and opinions on that one. So I've put in my leaving list Kubica, Giovinazzi and Gasly. So I'll run through them quickly, but once again, it's nothing personal. I feel like I just have to make sure that people realise that it's nothing personal against these drivers. I'm just trying to do some cool predictions here and not do this the every driver stays in their current team sort of thing. So Kubica, I think he'll probably try and find something else to do, because I don't feel he's enjoying himself really in Formula 1 right now. Giovinazzi, I think that Alfa Romeo will maybe try and do something a little bit different. I know Ferrari want to put their young drivers in that team, but looking at it right now, I feel like Giovinazzi isn't quite performing. As good as he can be, I don't think he's really performing up to the rate he can be, especially if you look at the points that Raikkonen's on. Of course, none of us expected him to be beating Raikkonen, but if Raikkonen's on 20 points, for example, and Giovinazzi's on 1, that's a massive difference between the two teammates, and that can't be allowed to happen, really. So yeah, that's the reason why I put Giovinazzi to maybe leave and De Vries to come in with a bit of money. And lastly, Gasly. I don't know. I really feel weird putting Gasly off this list, considering he's built up his career and it's got better and better each year. It's just sort of hit a plateau. If anything, got a bit worse this year. And I'm not too sure what's going to happen. If he gets kicked out of Red Bull this year, will they put him back into a Toro Rosso? I kind of feel like they won't do that. I feel like they'll just get rid of him from the program. When was the last time that happened? Red Bull just got rid of someone from their top team and didn't even put them back into another team, I should say, like Toro Rosso. It's not in recent memory that I can really think of. But nonetheless, that's it for this video. Let me know your thoughts, as always, in the comment section down below. I always enjoy reading them. Thank you once again. I massively appreciate your support. I realise my channel doesn't have like the most active viewers in the world, but I make videos because I love doing them, and I don't really look at now the number of views. It's just about the people that are commenting. So thank you once again for everyone doing so. Have an epic day. Hopefully enjoy the Grand Prix this weekend. I'm really looking forward to this one. Hopefully we'll get a bit of rain or something to make it really exciting. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Have a fantastic weekend. It's been Alex, and I'm out of here. Goodbye.